Hello everyone, welcome back to the oil tanker market update on the week. Here we look at three stocks, namely NAT, Frontline, and EURN, and we go over what their share price did over the past week and what I think their current projections are going to do based on the current market conditions. So let's get right into it. So as we can see right now, NAT had a good week, okay, up 3.5%, and even we can see on the month had a pretty good month, up 16%. And same thing with Frontline. We can see over 5 days it's up 2%, and Euronav up over 4% over the week, up on the month by 8%. All right. And the reason why, or the reason for this increase, I believe, in my opinion, is because generally oil demand increases in the winter months. And what that means is there's increased transportation, increased demand for oil and for oil tankers, right? And generally rates or spot rates tend to go up. Okay. I think another reason why the stock prices for oil tankers have generally gone up is because oil prices coincide with the stock rates of oil tankers. Okay. So when oil goes up, oil tankers also generally tend to go up. Okay. And that is exactly what happened this week. If we're looking at some of these highlights, so this was written on December 4th, higher OPEC output is expected to happen. And finally, oil hovers below $50, but this is a rise. Okay. It's, edging towards one of its top prices in the past years of 50 barrels, okay, or $50 a barrel, okay, which is, pretty impressive. Um, However, the spot rates are also depressed, okay, that's one thing we have to know. Over the week, the spot rates for Suezmax vessels was 2,400, for VLCC carriers was 11,200, all right. And finally, if we look at the presentation, we can see, of course, that in the winter months, as I said before, generally the spot rates tend to do well, okay? And this is exactly what happened in 2018 here and in 2019. However, we can see that the spot rates are currently depressed because of not enough of demand for oil and increased supply of oil, and again, oversupply of oil and storing this oil actually on oil tankers as floating storage. This all leads to depressed spot rates, okay? But I think the sentiment in the market for oil tankers right now is that a lot of this floating storage is offloading, and also that there's going to be increased demand for oil in the winter months, right? And that's why these stocks have gone up, okay? Sorry, we're just going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation here. And finally, we can see that Suezmax vessels rates have pretty much done nothing, even decreased from 7,300 to 6,300. However, this was relatively a good week for VLCC carriers, which carry double the amount of oil of Suezmax vessels, from 10,200 to 14,600, and also Aframax vessels, which carry half as much oil as Suezmax carriers do. They went from 10,600 to 8,500. Okay, and this represents again the general trend over the past like 4 years of different spot rates and time charter results. Okay, and we can see it's very, very depressed levels here. Okay, and same thing for the clean carriers. We can see lower rates overall, and the market in general, again, for the past for these different carriers, we can see it's very depressed right now. Okay, one thing I want to note is that only 6.9% of tanker fleet is currently used for floating storage, and of that, VLCC makes up the majority of floating storage. Okay, and this is actually down from last week. Last week it was about like 8.2% of tankers were currently being used for floating storage. Now, what does this mean? That means that a lot of these floating storage is offloading. So what this means is that generally there's an increased demand for oil because there's more oil not being stored on these oil tankers and actually being used. Okay, so that's, to me, is a good sign that demand is slowly increasing, which will hopefully correspond to spot rate prices down the line for these oil tankers. Okay, and again, I just want to go over again that tanker deliveries are again very, very depressed. If we look at 2020 compared to the past 4 years, and here's a graph if you want to pause it. Also, the tankers sold for recycling are at their lowest levels, and also the new order of tankers are pretty much at its lowest levels if we compare the past 5 years. Okay, so where do I think this stock is going coming into the winter months and generally oil tankers overall? Well, again, I think that the stock price will again upward trend slightly. Okay, so I think that of course there's going to be good days and bad days for oil tankers on the stock market, just like in general. However, with this upcoming vaccine distribution going across the world, hopefully an upcoming stimulus package, even announced before the New Year's, this is looking good for companies like NAT and the stock market in general, right? We can see right now, stock market, there's plenty of optimism in the market. We can see only a couple of stocks that have been down today, and I mean, one of these is gold, right? And when gold isn't doing so well, then it generally tends to sense that the market is doing well. Okay, so I mean, there's general optimism in the market, which is definitely also helping oil tankers, and I think this will continue, especially if we get a stimulus bill passed, and if, of course, we see a mass distribution of a vaccine over the coming week. So I do think that NAT and other oil tankers will be doing well in terms of their stock price in at least the coming months. However, I don't think Q4 will necessarily be anything astonishing since for the majority of Q4, at least up until now, spot rates have been incredibly low, okay, as we've seen, all right? So, however, of course, because the market is forward looking, that actually might not do much for the stock price of companies like NAT, right? Uh, and also part of the reason why is because if we're looking at the past 6 months, this company has also trended lower by 26%, right? So there's a lot of negativity in the stock anyways at the current moment. All right, so yeah, that's all I have for you. In recap, I don't think that these oil tankers are going anywhere anytime soon. In fact, I do think that the spot or the stock rates will increase slightly over the past couple of months due to optimism in the market, due to vaccines, due to a new stimulus bill, due to increased oil demand, okay? And therefore, increased spot rates should recover, all right? And again, stay tuned for the next oil tanker market. Have a great day, guys.